Hey everyone, it's Michael, and as you can tell by the title, today's video is on anime tropes that I find the most annoying. These are tropes that are generally poorly used and are just executed in a lazy way. That's not to say that there aren't examples of the tropes I mention being used in a good way, but more often than not, it's just, well, not. Now I just want to say that if your favorite trope is on here, I'd like to apologize for absolutely nothing. You need to see the truth, and that's that. So here are my top 5 most annoying anime tropes. At number 5, we have the Female Sunderer. This trope just f***ing sucks. Now, I know that's a controversial opinion because this is a staple of anime, but it does. For people who don't know what this is when a female character initially starts out as being cold or mean to the male lead character, but then warms up to the male lead over time and shows a friendlier side to the male character. This is generally used to build a romantic storyline between the female and male, but honestly, I think my annoyance with this trope is not necessarily the trope itself, because yeah, there are instances where this works and is even the best way to go. I mean, everyone will talk about Rin from Fate Stay Night being a good example of it being used well, and I mean, yeah, but there are other great examples. I'd argue a good underrated example is Chizuru Hishiro from Real Life, but my annoyance with this trope isn't with those good examples. My problem with this trope is that most times the mean part of the tsundere gets cranked up to 11, and the female character goes from being cold or having a laugh at the male lead's expense to just being a generally terrible person. And that leads to this problem of anime writers and mangakas basically using the tsundere trope as an excuse to portray women as being verbally and sometimes physically abusive as a normal thing to deal with when getting the girl. And like, no, it's not. I mean, it's not normal for a woman to say hurtful things to you or cause physical harm. And as a result, tsunderes being abusive is played for laughs, and most times it's just not a funny joke. And the sad thing with this trope is that more often than not, these stories have the tsundere and the male protagonist end up together as a romantic couple, which never fails to make me roll my eyes. Number 4, the power of friendship. Now, I'm sympathetic to this trope because I think friends cheering you on and that somehow having an impact on your performance to winning a contest is a very plausible thing. I'll remind you that in the real world, home court / home field advantage is statistically a very real thing, and that's just random fans cheering on their favorite sports teams. All that to say that one of the reasons the protagonist or protagonist will will themselves to victory because they are thinking of their friends or working with their friends is plausible. But notice what I said. I said one of the reasons. Oftentimes this trope is used as a lazy writing crutch to get the writer out of a corner as the sole reason or biggest reason for a big win. Do me a favor and comment below how many times you've seen this before in anime. Unstoppable villain who can beat the hero and their friends combined 10 times over loses to the hero, not because of a technical flaw, not because of a skill they haven't prepared for, not because of ingenuity, but because the hero is suddenly really determined not to let anything happen to his or her friends, and all of a sudden gets a massive surge in power and beats the unstoppable villain rather handedly or just overwhelms them in the final moments of the fight. Honestly, I blame Dragon Ball Z for this one. Even though Akira Toriyama did this right, because you see he tied getting the Super Saiyan power directly to rage, and Goku was pissed because he lost his friend. But in the process, many inspired writers did the same thing without getting why this worked, so now we have this mess of a trope. Number 3, the vacation or festival arc. I'm kind of chuckling to myself because I know people are going to come for my jugular on this one, but hear me out. First of all, I'm lumping these two together because they suffer from the same set of problems, or at least similar set of problems. Now, for people who don't know what I'm talking about, most anime do this thing where the protagonist will take a break from the usual and go on a vacation together or partake in a festival. And I get why, in theory, this can work. It's a way to change the pace of the show and see how characters act in chill situations. But a lot of writers just don't have faith that their characters are interesting enough to put them in mundane settings away from the premise. So one of two plot point options happen 9 times out of 10 with this arc. Option 1 is that the writer will go with the plot point that there's a problem that only the protagonist can solve while on vacation / at the festival, so they have to go fix it. But this always annoyed me because the situation just feels like a filler that has no greater significance to the overall story. My Hero Academia is a prime example of this because I actually like Gentle as a villain and I love how he's written, but he feels so insignificant to the story told, and if he ever comes back, he'll feel shoehorned a bit because, well, there's no real place for him. Plus, the people they help don't necessarily figure out how to solve the problem themselves next time. So sure, the heroes saved the day this time, but what's to say they'll fix the problem the next time because, well, they're on vacation. They're not coming back. Or option B is they'll take time to invest into the will they, won't they storyline of the love interests and use the arc to get them closer together in these situations. But you damn well know they won't tie that up, or the characters' attitudes towards each other won't actually change until the show is reaching the conclusion. So these romantic moments just feel pointless. In both cases, it's like this. The writers just don't feel their anime characters are good enough characters to rely on character dynamics, and that's a shame. Sometimes true, but it's still a shame. Number 2, explaining the sequence. Everybody knows this thing and why this is annoying as hell, but I'll explain it. Imagine you're watching the most awesome anime fight. It's going back and forth, and the hero or villain pulls off something badass, and then they take a break from the action to explain what they just did, or worse, the characters watching the fight explain what happened, thereby taking you out of the flow of the fight and infantilizing you all at the same time. This trope needs to die a painful death. The thing is, I know why authors and anime writers can't resist the temptation to do that. In a show where the character goes Super Saiyan, or has a fire in their belly, or goes plus ultra, there is a legit chance the audience can get lost, especially when dealing with a younger demographic. But the thing is, sometimes it's just best to let an anime stand on its own when it comes to these moments, especially when it's animated plain as day. The villain tanked an attack. Dope. The hero came up with a cool application to their power to catch their op off guard. Bless. Characters are at a stalemate. Awesome. We don't need an explanation for that. Just let it happen. And it's not just battle animes too. Slice of life and romance animes are horrible at doing this through a character's exposition, or psychological thrillers in an anime feel the need to explain a plot twist, and it's almost more egregious in those instances because at least with some battle anime, they can say that they're selling it to children who might not understand. The slice of life shows and the thrillers can't say that because they're catering to an age group who don't need someone holding their hand by explaining every single thing. I will say, I do like this trope in one instance, and it's while the explainer is a sports announcer or an analyst of some kind in a sporting event, because at that point, it's more so to add to the atmosphere of a show and not just to hold our hand. But other than that, this trope is a plague that needs to go to the Shadow Realm and never come back. And number 1, the sympathetic slave owner. Ooh boy. Wow. This is a staple of anime that unfortunately makes me sad and disgusted, but not just because of the obvious thing that it's slavery, but the usual writing around this trope. Let me explain what I mean as detailed as I can. I think an example of how to handle this trope that I can kind of sort of get behind is in the show Rising of the Shield Hero. Spoiler alert, but in Rising of the Shield Hero, our main protagonist, Naofumi Iwatani, is exiled and shunned by the world. So because of that, he is without any resources and party members, so he resorts to, well, buying a slave who can fight, but instead of doing that, he takes pity on a slave girl named Raphtalia who is sick and on the verge of death. He feeds her, nurses her back to health, and becomes friendly with her as the series goes on. But it's clear that he needs Raphtalia to prove her worth in battle, and he only really starts warming up to her more and more as admittedly more touching character moments between the two happen. And there are character moments that I'm not going to spoil in this list video, but they are nice. Now here's why in some ways this works. The world does not present slavery as a good thing, nor does the world present Naofumi as a good person because of this, and in fact implies him to be a bad person for doing it. But in his mind, he has no choice, and well, the world is shitty to him, so why not go low too? At the same time, the show is clear to show that Naofumi has a conscience and he won't be evil to Raphtalia. In fact, he treats her relatively well at first and increasingly better throughout their time together. As a result, it makes for legit solid plot points in the show, and the writing is purposely making you think conflicting thoughts about their relationship that they're cultivating. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but you can see the attempt at handling this trope in a tactful and interesting way. That's not what happens with most animes that do this. Most of the time, anime, well, let's be honest, it's mostly but not exclusively isekai, will have an OP protagonist who I should add is usually male and could abolish slavery on a whim, gets the slave somehow, who I should add is usually a female, oftentimes a minor, and treats her better, but still keeps the practice of slavery going, where the slavers in the world the anime presents can still act however they want to slaves. And all the while, the story presents the protagonist as a good person for buying the slave because at least he's not sleeping with the slave he just bought. It gets worse because oftentimes, if it's a female slave, she is so grateful she yearns for a sexual relationship with the protagonist. Does anyone else see the problem here? Like, am I crazy for having a problem with this? To be frank, most mangaka, light novel authors, and anime writers do not know how to handle this trope and just end up making me sick when they try it. I'll leave it at that. So those are my top 5 anime tropes. As usual, comment below if you think I'm wrong about these tropes, which I know someone will. But also let me know if you find some of these tropes I mentioned and other tropes annoying. Oh, and like and subscribe. I'm Michael, and until next time, have a blessed day.